You are currently inhabiting a state of metabolic vanity, and it is the primary reason your strategic capital is being liquidated to fund a theater of success that provides zero structural inertia. You believe that your luxury acquisitions, the high-performance vehicle, the horological centerpiece on your wrist, the designer substrate on your back, are symbols of your ascent. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, these are not assets. They are the peacock's debt. They are high-maintenance signals that require a constant infusion of your life force to maintain their validity. You are currently displaying fitness while the matrix is busy harvesting your surplus. We are now bisecting the biology of the signal, showing you why conspicuous consumption is a form of strategic self-sabotage and how the apex predator utilizes strategic obscurity to move from the frequency of the showman to the frequency of the sovereign lord. The human nervous system is governed by an ancient evolutionary mechanism known as the handicap principle. For millions of years, biological signals of fitness had to be costly to be honest. A peacock's tail is heavy, cumbersome, and attracts predators. Therefore, if a peacock survives in spite of its tail, it must possess superior genes. The tail is a handicap that proves the bird's metabolic surplus. The matrix has performed a neural hijack on this circuit. It has replaced genetic fitness with financial display. It has trained you to believe that to be high status, you must carry a handicap of luxury debt and maintenance costs. This is biological gaslighting. By encouraging you to decorate your cage, the hierarchy ensures that you never accumulate enough unencumbered force to actually buy the key to the gate. You are currently paying a tax on vanity that you mistakenly call the good life. Consider the pathology of status signaling. Every time you acquire an object designed to be seen by the swarm, you are incurring a neurological debt. You are now tethered to the opinion of the scavenger. To maintain the signal, you must continue to inhabit the fixed coordinates where that signal has value. You must stay within the matrix's grid to service the lifestyle. This is strategic domestication. The hierarchy loves a visible winner because a visible winner is a predictable variable. They know exactly how much metabolic output is required to sustain your theater, and they ensure that your yield is just enough to keep the show running, but never enough to fund an exit strike. You are asset-rich and freedom-broke, trapped in a loop of conspicuous waste. The sovereign architect performs a clinical audit of the signal. He asks, does this object provide me with more territory, or does it merely demand that I be seen? If the answer is the latter, it is a metabolic leak, and it is slated for immediate liquidation. We must now analyze the biology of the status sink. In nature, an organism that spends too much energy on display during a resource reset is the first to be liquidated. We are currently in a systemic reset of the 2026 landscape. Inflation, algorithmic displacement, and jurisdictional volatility are the predators in the environment. In this landscape, luxury is the equivalent of a neon sign that says, I have a surplus of calories, come and harvest me. The state, the litigators, and the social scavengers all target the visible peacock. This is informational vulnerability. The sovereign predator understands the power of the average. He practices camouflage dominance. He drives the gray vehicle. He wears the unbranded substrate, and he inhabits the invisible coordinate. He hides his metabolic weight in hard assets and automated systems that do not broadcast a signal to the swarm. He is not hiding, he is sequestrating force. He understands that in a hunt, the most dangerous predator is the one the prey never sees coming. The architecture of the peacock's debt is maintained by the neurochemistry of social recognition. When you are recognized as a high-status individual by the swarm, your brain receives a dopamine serotonin flush. This synthetic high is what keeps you addicted to the theater. It is the same reward circuit that keeps the gambler at the table or the addict on the needle. The matrix utilizes this validation loop to ensure you never seek internal sovereignty. You are outsourcing your worth to the eyes of people you don't even respect. This is hormonal slavery. The sovereign accountant performs a neurological reset. He disconnects his sense of self from the validation of the herd. He seeks his dopamine in the annexation of new territory and his serotonin in the stability of his garrison. He reaches a state of hormonal stillness where he no longer feels the urge to display. He has moved from the frequency of the actor to the frequency of the director. The transition from display to dominance requires the utilization of the protocol 260. For those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the peacock trap to the high-voltage sovereignty of the auditor, the protocol provides the invisible infrastructure. You utilize the AI machine to build apex assets that exist in the informational shadows. You generate yield through automated systems that do not require you to dress the part. This automated flow allows you to accumulate dark capital, wealth that is not tied to your social persona. You use this dark capital to buy the substrate of permanence, the land, the energy, and the private law, while the unevolved are still busy financing the peacock's tail. By the time the swarm realizes you have achieved total sovereignty, you have already moved your entire existence into a non-auditable atmosphere. We must observe the neurochemistry of strategic obscurity. There is a profound power differential between the man who is rich and the man who looks rich. The man who looks rich is always performing. His nervous system is in a state of chronic sympathetic arousal, scanning for signs of disrespect or status loss. But the sovereign who inhabits strategic obscurity operates from a state of absolute stillness. He possesses the high ground advantage because he knows the true ledger while the world only sees the camouflage. This allows him to move through the matrix without triggering the status policing of the hierarchy. He can buy the territory before the price is inflated by social hype. He can infiltrate the grid without being identified as a threat. He has moved from the frequency of the prey, the peacock, to the frequency of the predator, the leopard. The entropy of the self-worth through net worth narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that success is a lifestyle. No. In the persistence hunt, success is the ability to dictate reality. A lifestyle is just a set of pre-packaged consumer choices provided by the matrix to keep you in the grazing zone. The sovereign accountant focuses on operational autonomy. He reaches a point of atmospheric sovereignty where he no longer cares about the status quo because he is the architect of his own standard. He has achieved temporal independence. He is the judge of his own value, and his internal law is the only accounting standard that matters. He is not showing off for a world he doesn't control. He is measuring a world he owns. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the consumer to the vertical axis of the sovereign auditor. You must stop buying status and start acquiring force. The hunt is not a social parade. It is a specific target acquisition of the time and the focus that defines your existence. You must decide what you are. Are you the peacock whose tail is being used to tether you to the hierarchy, or the sovereign predator who has shed the debt of vanity to fund his own empire? The primal code is not about looking successful, it is about being formidable. Find the coordinate where the display stops and the power begins, and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your ego leaks, and begin the final ascent of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the flashy, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop paying the debt and start annexing the light. You are currently inhabiting a state of strategic liquidation, and it is the primary reason your metabolic surplus is failing to condense into dynastic substrate. You believe that as your income scales, your lifestyle must scale in parallel to reflect your new hierarchical coordinate. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, the luxury lifestyle is not a reward. It is a recycling plant. It is a sophisticated mechanism designed by the matrix to identify organisms that have captured a surplus of energy and to perform a high-frequency extraction of that energy before it can ever be used to achieve escape velocity. You are currently leveling up while the hierarchy is busy grounded your potential. We are now presecting the architecture of the status sink, showing you why upgrading your life is a tactical retreat and how the apex predator utilizes metabolic compression to move from the frequency of the nouveau riche to the frequency of the sovereign lord. The matrix has professionalized the biological harvesting of the winner. For millions of years, an organism that successfully annexed a resource-rich territory would utilize that surplus to harden its defenses, expand its progeny, and secure its future. This is the primal protocol. However, the modern hierarchy has inserted a software patch into this circuit. It has created the status sink, a multi-layered array of Veblen goods and synthetic experiences that possess a unique property. They become more attractive as you become more formidable. The more force you capture, the more the matrix pressures you to project force through consumption. This is strategic sabotage. By convincing you that being a boss requires looking like a boss, the giants ensure that your captured force is immediately recycled back into the consumer grid. You are running on a treadmill of metabolic waste, and the faster you run, the more the system profits from your sweat. Consider the biology of lifestyle creep. From a neurological perspective, every upgrade you make to your physical existence, the larger residence, the high-maintenance vehicle, the concierge medical service, is a neurological anchor. These acquisitions do not just cost money, they cost cognitive bandwidth. Every object you own that requires maintenance energy is a biological parasite that occupies a portion of your prefrontal cortex. You are no longer focused on the hunt, you are focused on preserving the theater. This is neurological pacification. The hierarchy wants you to have a complex lifestyle, because a complex lifestyle is fragile. It makes you risk-averse. You cannot afford a systemic reset because you have too many monthly tributes to pay to the providers of your comfort. You have traded your apex aggression for high-status anxiety. The sovereign accountant performs a clinical audit of complexity. He asks, does this upgrade simplify my strike or does it complicate my defense? If it adds friction, it is a metabolic sink and it is slated for immediate liquidation. We must now analyze the pathology of the visible winner. In any predatory landscape, the most vulnerable organism is the one that broadcasts its resource density to the entire swarm. The matrix encourages you to be visible, to post your wins, to display your symbols, and to inhabit the status coordinates of the hive. This is informational suicide. When you show the world your tail, you are providing every scavenger in the environment with a map of your vulnerabilities. The taxman, the litigator, the social parasite, and the institutional predator all calibrate their bite based on your display. You are effectively auditing yourself for the enemy. The sovereign predator understands the power of the shadow. He understands that true wealth is the wealth that the matrix cannot target. He practices metabolic compression. He keeps his external surface area small while expanding his internal mass. He lives in the gray zone, where his force is felt but his coordinates are unknown. He is the ghost in the grid. The architecture of the status sink is reinforced by the neurochemistry of social grooming. The modern high-status event, the gala, the networking retreat, the VIP lounge, is nothing more than an ancestral grooming circle for domesticated primates. You are burning high-voltage time on the mutual validation of fictions. You are seeking approval from a group of highly paid slaves who are just as tethered to the matrix as you are. This is hormonal slavery. Your brain receives a serotonin flush from being the big fish in the small pond, while the high-ground predators are busy annexing the entire pond. The sovereign architect performs a neurological divorce. He seeks his validation not in the eyes of the swarm, but in the integrity of his ledger. He reaches a state of hormonal independence where he can walk through a status sink and feel absolutely nothing. He has moved from the frequency of the participant to the frequency of the auditor. The transition from lifestyle to infrastructure requires the utilization of the protocol 260. For those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the luxury trap to the high-voltage sovereignty of the auditor, the protocol provides the digital garrison. You utilize the AI machine to build high-velocity yield vents that operate in the informational abyss. You generate flow that is silent. This automated surplus is not spent on status signals. It is sequestrated into substrate. You use the flow to buy back your time sovereignty and to fund your private law. You are building a world within a world, a garrison where you provide your own security, your own information, and your own energy. By the time the unevolved realize that you have won, you have already disappeared from the standard hierarchical map. You have achieved atmospheric sovereignty. We must observe the neurochemistry of the lean predator. There is a profound energy differential between the man who is burdened by his possessions and the man who is liquid and lethal. The man in the status sink is heavy. He moves slowly. He thinks within the boundaries of his comfort, and he is easily herded by the matrix. But the sovereign who has compressed his metabolism is light and aggressive. He possesses the high ground advantage because he has zero metabolic leaks. He can pivot his entire life force in a single second because he is not tethered to a fixed coordinate of luxury. He has moved from the frequency of the resident to the frequency of the nomad. He does not own things. He commands forces. The entropy of the successor's lifestyle. Narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that having more is the same as being more. No. In the persistence hunt, being more is the ability to do more with less friction. A lifestyle is a lease on your autonomy. The sovereign accountant focuses on structural mass. He reaches a point of temporal dominance where his automated yield covers his metabolic minimum 100 times over, and yet his visible footprint remains that of a shadow. This asymmetric gap is where his true power resides. He is the judge of his own standard, and his internal law is the only accounting standard that survives the reset. He is not living the dream. He is architecting the reality. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the consumer to the vertical axis of the sovereign auditor. You must stop upgrading your cage and start liquidating your friction. The hunt is not a social parade. It is a specific target acquisition of the freedom and the territory that defines your existence. You must decide what you are. Are you the peacock whose status is being used to recycle your life force, or the sovereign predator who has compressed his metabolism to fund his own empire. The primal code is not about luxe living, it is about total systemic independence. Find the coordinate where the status sink ends and the sovereign substrate begins, and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your luxury leaks, and begin the final ascent of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the visible, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop spending your power and start garrisoning your potential. You are currently inhabiting a state of generational sabotage, and it is the primary reason your accumulation is destined to be liquidated by the very offspring you claim to be protecting. You believe that exposing your children to the good life, to the aesthetics of luxury, the comfort of high-status environments, and the effortless consumption of premium resources is the ultimate gift of a successful founder. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, you are not giving them a head start. You are saddling them with a biological handicap they have not earned the metabolic strength to carry. You are handing the peacock's tail to a fledgling that hasn't even learned to fly. We are now presecting the biology of the inherited signal, showing you why luxury for heirs is a strategic strike against your own bloodline, and how the apex predator utilizes strategic scarcity to move from the frequency of the doting provider to the frequency of the dynastic architect. The Matrix has professionalized the biological softening of the elite. For millions of years, the offspring of the apex were required to undergo the most rigorous status audits to prove their worthiness to lead the pride. They were not given the kill, they were given the opportunity to hunt under the protection of the sovereign. However, the modern status sink has replaced this hunting protocol with a consumption protocol. By surrounding your heirs with the symbols of your success, you are performing a neurological hijack on their development. You are providing them with the hormonal rewards of victory, the serotonin of high status, and the dopamine of luxury, without the metabolic expenditure required to achieve it. This is hormonal counterfeiting. You are raising organisms that possess the expectations of a king, but the competence of a peasant. When the reset occurs, they will be the first to be harvested by the hierarchy. Consider the pathology of the status threshold. The human brain calibrates its baseline for satisfaction during the formative years of neurological plasticity. If an heir is raised in a fixed coordinate of luxury, private jets, designer substrates, and concierge service, their hormonal floor is set at an impossibly high level. To feel a sense of achievement, they must exceed the baseline you have established. But because they did not build the infrastructure of force that supports that baseline, they have zero tactical knowledge on how to expand it. This creates a state of chronic hierarchical anxiety. They spend their lives trying to maintain the theater you built, rather than annexing new territory. They become custodians of decay, liquidating the hard substrate of the dynasty to pay for the high-maintenance signal of their lifestyle. You didn't give them the best, you gave them a metabolic prison. We must now analyze the biology of the softened predator. In nature, the handicap principle serves a specific function. It proves that the organism is so powerful it can survive despite the burden of its display. When you drive the luxury vehicle, it is a signal of your captured force. But when your child drives that same vehicle, the signal is a biological lie. It does not reflect their force. It reflects your metabolic subsidy. This subsidy prevents the activation of the prefrontal cortex. The heir does not learn to identify resource gaps because they have never experienced a resource deficit. They do not learn strategic patience because their desires are satisfied instantly. They are neurologically stagnant. The sovereign architect performs a clinical audit of friction. He understands that competence is born in the void. He deliberately keeps the status signal of his heirs low, forcing them to inhabit the frequency of the hunter until they have annexed their own sovereign substrate. The architecture of the peacock's debt is reinforced by the social mirroring of the elite. The Matrix wants your children to be socialites, to inhabit the grooming circles of the wealthy swarm. They want them to value pedigree, connections, and validation. This is strategic domestication. It ensures that your heirs remain legible and controllable by the hierarchy. They are taught to fear status loss more than territorial loss. This makes them the perfect victims for the next systemic reset. The sovereign predator understands the power of the gray heir. He trains his offspring in strategic obscurity. He sends them to the front lines of the economic hunt with zero visible support. He wants them to be invisible predators who can move through any hierarchical layer without being identified as soft targets. He is not providing for them. He is weaponizing their existence. The transition from providing luxury to forging sovereignty requires the utilization of the protocol 260. For those ready to move from the metabolic waste of the doting parent to the high-voltage sovereignty of the architect, the protocol provides the dynastic training ground. You utilize the AI machine to build autonomous yield systems that the heir must manage and expand to earn their metabolic surplus. You do not give them money, you give them flow management responsibility. This automated infrastructure acts as a synthetic environment where the heir can practice strategic annexation with real stakes but within the controlled perimeter of the garrison. You are using the code to replace the comfort. You are ensuring that by the time they reach the apex coordinate, their hormonal floor is built on demonstrated competence, not inherited display. We must observe the neurochemistry of the self-made identity. There is a profound difference between the serotonin levels of an heir who inherited the tail and an heir who annexed the territory. The inherited heir is perpetually insecure, knowing subconsciously that their status is a loan from the father. This leads to volatility, addiction, and systemic failure. But the heir who has been forged in friction possesses the absolute stillness of the founder. They do not need the peacock's tail because they are the power. They can walk through the world in gray substrate and still project the hierarchical mass that forces the environment to yield. This is the winner effect passed through clinical instruction rather than liquid cash. They have moved from the frequency of the scavenger to the frequency of the source. The entropy of the parental love as provision narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that loving your children means making their lives easy. No. In the persistence hunt, loving your children means making them formidable. Anything else is a form of generational betrayal. The sovereign accountant focuses on structural solvency of the bloodline. He reaches a point of atmospheric sovereignty where his provision is not comfort but opportunity for annexation. He provides the armor, the information, and the energy, but the hunt belongs to the heir. He has achieved temporal dominance. He is the judge of his own legacy, and his internal law is the only standard that dictates the succession of the code. He is not raising kids. He is forging the sentinels of his dynasty. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the status-obsessed consumer to the vertical axis of the sovereign architect. You must stop decorating their lives and start garrisoning their wills. The hunt is not a family vacation. It is a specific target acquisition of the survival instinct that will define your lineage for the next 300 years. You must decide what you are. Are you the peacock whose death will destroy your children's future, or the sovereign predator who has liquidated the display to fund the forging of the future? The primal code is not about the good life. It is about the dominant life. Find the coordinate where the luxury stops and the training begins, and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up, audit your provision leaks, and begin the final forging of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the soft, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop giving and start building power. You are currently inhabiting the vacuum of the post-visible era, and it is the only coordinate from which true, irreversible atmospheric sovereignty can be maintained. You have successfully navigated the liquidation of the peacock. You have shed the metabolic weight of the status sink, and you have disconnected your identity from the validation grid of the matrix. But now, you face the final challenge of the apex predator, the management of absolute stillness. You believe that the end of the journey is a state of luxury and relaxation where you finally enjoy your captured force. This is a terminal civilizational hallucination. In the raw, unyielding arena of the persistence hunt, relaxation is just another word for neurological decay. The sovereign architect does not retire into comfort. He resets into dominance. We are now bisecting the biology of the invisible throne, showing you why silence is the ultimate weapon and how the apex founder utilizes informational sovereignty to move from the frequency of the winner to the frequency of the governor of reality. The human nervous system is an evolutionary organ of feedback loops. For millions of years, your ancestors survived by correctly interpreting the signals of the environment, the movement of the prey, the aggression of the rival, the consensus of the tribe. The Matrix has utilized this signal sensitivity to keep you trapped in the peacock's debt, forcing you to constantly broadcast and receive status data. When you enter the sovereign reset, you are performing a total neural decoupling. You are removing the mirror neuron pressure of the swarm. This creates a biological void that most men find terrifying. Without the applause of the scavengers or the audit of the hierarchy, the unevolved mind begins to fragment. But the sovereign predator fills this void with the internal law of the ledger. He reaches a state of hormonal stillness, where his dopamine is no longer a variable controlled by the matrix, but a tool controlled by his own strategic intent. Consider the pathology of the invisible throne. In the history of the hierarchy, the most powerful entities have always been the most obscure. The giants do not walk the streets in peacock substrate. They inhabit the information enclaves, the family offices, the private trust jurisdictions, and the encrypted networks where the true ledger of the world is balanced. They understand that visibility is a tax on power. When you inhabit strategic obscurity, you gain the asymmetric advantage of surprise. You can move massive amounts of force without triggering a counterstrike from the matrix. You can annex territories, digital, financial, or physical, while the world is still looking at the visible peacocks who act as your decoys. You have moved from the frequency of the target to the frequency of the archer. You are not avoiding the world, you are governing it from the shadows. We must now analyze the biology of metabolic sequestration. Once the peacock's debt has been liquidated, your caloric surplus begins to accumulate at an exponential rate. You are no longer wasting energy on status maintenance, social grooming, or institutional compliance. This surplus energy must be fixed into the hard substrate of the garrison. The sovereign architect utilizes this energy to build redundant defense perimeters. He invests in hard matter independence, private energy production, decentralized water filtration, physical land that is unauditable by the hive, and informational sentinels that scan the environment for systemic resets. He is building a life support system for a dynasty that functions independently of the global grid. He understands that the only true wealth is the wealth that survives the total reset of the financial theater. He is not investing for growth, he is sequestrating for permanence. The architecture of the sovereign reset requires a transition from public consumption to private production. You must view your life as a closed-loop ecosystem. In the digital age, this means utilizing the protocol 260 to build ghost empires. You utilize the AI machine to perform the metabolic labor of the world, capturing the attention and the resources of the swarm, and you funnel that yield into your private substrate. You do not participate in the economy, you harvest the economy. Your visible persona becomes a shadow, a standard gray man data point that the matrix ignores, while your internal mass grows to the scale of a sovereign nation. You are moving your accounting from the horizontal plane of the taxpayer to the vertical axis of the global auditor. You have achieved jurisdictional exit velocity. We must observe the neurochemistry of the final transition. The sovereign reset is marked by the permanent activation of the ancestor circuitry. You are no longer thinking about your own happiness or comfort. Those are the concerns of the domesticated organism. You are thinking about the integrity of the relay. You are looking at your heirs and seeing the future commanders of your garrison. You are teaching them the primal code of the shadow. You are showing them that the peacock's tail is a leash and that silence is the only true signal of power. This strategic coldness is the ultimate form of biological love. It is the only thing that will save them from the great liquidation of the unevolved. You are passing on the substrate of sovereignty, a world where they are the judges, not the subjects. You have moved from the frequency of the mortal to the frequency of the source. The entropy of the individual freedom narrative is the final cage. The giants want you to believe that freedom is the ability to do whatever you want. No. In the persistence hunt, freedom is the ability to dictate the law of your own territory. Anything less is just a longer leash. The sovereign architect focuses on constitutional autonomy. He reaches a point of atmospheric sovereignty where his house is its own private reality, governed by his internal law. He no longer reacts to the news, the markets, or the social shifts of the hive. He censors the hive from his existence. He has achieved temporal independence. He is the judge of his own eternity, and his silence is the wall that protects the purity of his code. He is not escaping reality, he is creating reality. Recognition of this biological requirement is the only way out of the mud. You must move from the horizontal plane of the visible winner to the vertical axis of the sovereign ghost. You must stop performing and start architecting the reset. The hunt is not a social success. It is a specific target acquisition of the total and irreversible sovereignty that defines your lineage. You must decide what you are. Are you the peacock whose debt is currently being audited by the matrix, or the sovereign predator who has liquidated the display to fund his own transcendence? The primal code is not about having a great life. It is about being an unbreakable foundation. Find the coordinate where the signal stops and the substrate begins, and put all your metabolic weight on it. Stand up. Audit your visibility leaks, and begin the final reset of your sovereign kingdom. The abyss is waiting for the display, but the substrate is waiting for the sovereign. Stop paying for your status and start owning your silence.